Revealed, the incredible moment a rancher shocked everyone with a touching act of courage. Jack stood in the chilly morning air, his breath a plume against the dawning light of Texas. Around him, the far reaches of his grandfather's ranch stretched into the horizon, a legacy he cherished, molded by long years of sweat and sacrifice. Yet, a storm was brewing, not just in the sky. The weight of impending debt and corporate threats loomed over him like a dark cloud. As he inspected the furrows in his fields, the familiar pang of unease sank deeper into his chest. How long could he keep the ranch going? With every phone call from debt collectors, the walls felt tighter, closing in on him and his dreams. The moment his hands brushed against cold paper remnants, something began to shake him from within. He recognized the corporate insignia emblazoned across the documents, evidence of considerable environmental violations linked to the very corporation seeking to acquire this beloved land. A rush of adrenaline coursed through him as he read the alarming phrases, each one echoing a warning louder than the last. His heart raced, the fear of confrontation mingled with indignation. They weren't just dismantling his livelihood, they threatened the very essence of those who had come before him. Distant memories of barbecues, laughter, and the warmth of family echoed in his mind. Am I really willing to put my family at risk? He wondered, anxiety mounting with every crow of the rooster. Was it worth it to take a stand, knowing that the backlash could result in dire consequences? A rancher's honor held weight in this small town, yet the dark reality was that leaning on those values could cost him everything he held dear. Jack felt pulled in every direction, between his responsibility to provide for his wife and children, and the longing to protect the land that had sculpted his very being. Before the thoughts could completely engulf him, another wave washed over him, a recollection of a neighbor who had once stood up against corporate greed. He remembered the defeat in their eyes when the big wigs had retaliated. Could he dare to assemble with others like them? The spiraling doubt waged war against the flicker of hope. Maybe he wasn't alone in this fight. Maybe, distant from the fear that swirled within, he could ignite camaraderie amongst those who felt just as cornered. But the clock was ticking. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The pressure was unbearable. As he crouched by his fields, hands digging into the earth, he felt the dread creep and the fear of losing his family's legacy overshadowing his thoughts. What if gathering allies only brought more peril? Would it shatter the fragile peace they had maintained within their home? He could already hear the whispers, the doubts. Jack knew his next move would define everything. With the takeover looming, he wrestled with the choices before him. His heart raced as he envisioned walking into the community hall, prepared to expose the misdeeds he uncovered, a choice that would either fortify his stand or summon an inevitable downfall. Would he step into the open and risk it all, or remain hidden in the shadows, wrestling with his convictions until they consumed him? The fear of what could happen was palpable, clutching at his throat. The air felt electric with a tension that would not let go, holding him captive as the precipice of his decision grew closer. The sun hung low in the Texas sky, casting long shadows across the ranch as Jack slowly made his way to the community hall. Each step felt heavy, each footfall a reminder of the burden he carried. The cold, crisp air wrapped around him, as chilling as the reality he faced. He grappled with the stark contrast of tradition and modernity, the love for his land juxtaposed with a corporate machine that operated without soul or sentiment. Inside the hall, the scent of coffee mingled with the crackling energy of whispered conversations. Familiar faces turned towards him, their expressions hinting at curiosity and concern. Jack swallowed hard, heartbeat echoing like thunder in his ears. This was the moment. He'd envisioned it 1,000 times, but now that he stood on the brink of action, his throat burned with doubt. Would they listen? Could he articulate the urgency of their plight against the sprawling corporate entity? He scanned the room, searching for comfort in the faces of neighbors who had fought their own battles. A flicker of recognition met his eyes. His neighbor Carla, a fierce woman with an iron will, gave him an encouraging nod. She had also felt the sting of corporate overreach and bore scars from standing her ground. Jack drew strength from her presence. Maybe he wasn't alone. With the meeting about to commence, he took a deep breath and stepped forward, feeling the weight of every gaze upon him. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, voice steady yet strained. "This isn't just about us anymore. It's about our land and our legacy." The murmurs subsided as he laid bare the evidence he had unearthed, a series of environmental violations that could threaten their land, their water, and their future. Jack spoke passionately, the words rushing forth with the fervor he hadn't realized was building inside him. He recalled those barbecues and laughter, linking memories with the present struggle. "We can't allow this corporation to walk all over us," he asserted. Each sentence ignited embers of conviction among the crowd, voices rising in agreement. Hope began swirling, a warm undercurrent amid the cold reality of their circumstances. Then a voice, sharp and dismissive, cut through the room. "And what do you suggest we do, Jack? They have money. We have what?" It was Frank, an old rival, embittered by past decisions and struggles. The tension in the hall thickened, a smothering weight that seemed to clamp around Jack's chest once more. He had to respond, but how? He couldn't let doubt seep into the newly lit fire. "The truth can rally us," he replied, determination seeping into every word. "If we unite our voices, we can make them listen. We can fight. We can protect what is ours." Several heads nodded, resilience ignited in pockets around the room. As the meeting progressed, plans began to blossom. Ideas took root. Jack felt a surge of pride mingle with his anxiety. He was growing into this role, transforming from the man paralyzed by fear to one willing to lead a charge. The newfound confidence echoed in his veins. Yet, the specter of opposition loomed large. He understood the road ahead would not be easy. Retaliation could become the very real consequence of their collective action. As they discussed strategies and next steps, a gnawing feeling settled deep within him. What could go wrong? The clock was ticking, and the corporation wasn't planning to retreat without a fight. With the meeting drawing to a close, Jack took one last look around the room. Familiar faces now wore expressions of determination, camaraderie igniting. The decisions he faced were monumental and fraught with peril, yet the thought of turning back was unsettling. He felt a flicker of hope, but it was overshadowed by an encroaching dread. The moment was approaching when he would need to confront the corporate powers directly. Would he be strong enough to endure the fallout of his choices? The real battle was about to begin, and he had to steel himself against the inevitable confrontation waiting just beyond the horizon. The days that followed the meeting were a blend of anticipation and trepidation for Jack. The initial adrenaline of rallying support and igniting a spark of defiance began to fade, replaced by a nagging anxiety that clawed at the corners of his mind. The stakes had grown overnight, and whispers of their plans echoed in both his thoughts and the community. Yet, doubt lingered, wrapped around him like the chilly fog that often settled in the early mornings. Jack found himself waking early, plagued by nighttime visions of the future, a future where the ranch lay in ruins, swallowed by the hunger of corporate greed. His mornings were spent poring over documents, poring through legal insights and environmental regulations. In each line of text, he sought knowledge not only to defend the land but to arm himself with the tools necessary for their upcoming confrontation. In the solitude of the kitchen, he prepared coffee, mechanizing the process as his mind churned with strategies and repercussions. A simple act, grinding the beans, boiling water, now felt so laden with significance. Each sip was a tentative affirmation of his resolve, a necessity to clear the fog from his mind. That he reached out to Carla, relying on her expertise to craft a plan of action. They began meeting in the evenings under the dim porch light of her house, poring over maps and strategizing their approach. Each session deepened Jack's respect for her resilience. She had lived through more corporate threats than most and had valuable insights that surged through their discussions. Jack began to discover pieces of himself during these sessions too: the ability to listen, to absorb details, and the willingness to adapt. "Let us begin with a timeline," Carla suggested one evening. We need to prepare for pushback. There's no doubt they'll try to intimidate us. Jack nodded, heart racing. Her confidence rekindled his own. They drafted letters, reached out to environmental groups, and filled spreadsheets with relevant data. Their conversations became a lifeline for Jack, slowly transforming his fear into a growing determination. One night, after they finalized a particularly poignant letter to the local newspaper, Jack suddenly realized he was no longer just a passive observer. He was stepping into a leadership role he had never envisioned for himself. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Texas sky in hues of orange and purple, Jack felt something shift within him. He was no longer just defending a piece of land, he was safeguarding a slice of his identity, an extension of who he was as a man. The weight of the responsibility settled heavily but comfortably on his shoulders. One day, while ambling across the fields that had forever been his sanctuary, Jack stumbled upon a withered tree, a once majestic oak now marred by the creeping advance of new developments. It stood there, defiant yet in despair. Anger ignited within him, blazing a trail through his doubt. He could hear the whispers of the land, pleading not only for its survival but for a custodian willing to stand their ground. Determination surged through him anew. Jack quoted his father's words to himself, "It's not about fighting them, it's about standing tall enough that they know their fight won't be easy." He straightened his back, knowing that this was no longer just an internal battle but one that would call for his unwavering commitment to fight for what was right. As days turned to weeks, Jack prepared for what lay ahead, scrutinizing every detail while fighting the rising tide of fear. He felt a growing sense of both caution and courage, a complexity within him that urged him forward. It was time to face the corporate power, to test the resolve of his newfound commitments and confront the challenges that lay ahead. The weight of decisions loomed larger as the scheduled meeting with the corporation approached. Jack understood the implications of this confrontation could reshape his life, the lives of those around him, and the land he so dearly loved. Would he maintain his resolve when forced into the room of polished executives and board members, where intimidation reigned supreme? Heart pounding with anticipation, Jack braced for the defining moment, one that would demand every ounce of courage he had cultivated. That moment was drawing near, and Jack felt the tension coil tighter, the stakes higher than ever, urging him forward into the fray awaiting him. Jack stood at the precipice of change, the looming meeting with the corporation casting a long shadow over his resolve. He navigated the days with a blend of restless energy and simmering nerves, each moment punctuated by an overwhelming desire to preserve his land and ancestral legacy. As he woke each morning, the tangle of strategy and fear surfaced again, forming an intricate web that tethered him to the reality he would soon face. The day before the meeting arrived with an uncharacteristic stillness. Jack decided to walk the perimeter of the ranch, a ritual he often found soothing. Each step brought back memories, his father's laughter echoing in the fields, the way the sunlight danced on the corn in the late summer. But this time, the familiar sights felt overshadowed by an urgent need for clarity. He looked around at the rolling hills, and a familiar sense of ownership washed over him. This land was not just earth and grass, it was history, love, and a direct link to his identity. The hours spent prepping with Carla solidified a growing truth within him: he was more than just a rancher, he was a guardian, a figure who must confront looming threats and speak for those who could not. The fear that had previously plagued him now transformed into a fierce determination to stand up for what he believed was right. That night, as Jack lined his papers and documents at the kitchen table, he felt a flicker of something unexpected, a determination twisted with an awareness that perhaps he still had much to learn. Each piece of paper contained not only the facts and figures he'd gathered but echoes of his voice, an untested voice now amplified by righteous purpose. Each word weighed heavy with consequence, igniting a silent dialogue within. If the corporation had their way, they would systematically dismantle not only the land but also the spirit that had thrived there for generations. The thought sent a shiver down his spine. He could not allow this dilapidation to occur without a fight. That he practiced what he would say in front of the executives, pacing the kitchen, enunciating every point with a deliberate clarity that shocked him. For someone who had once shunned confrontation, he found himself almost relishing the idea of standing tall in front of the board members, confident in his knowledge and his mission. In the quiet spaces between breaths, doubts crept in, casting flickers of uncertainty into his mind. What if he could not match their authority? What if his arguments fell flat against their polished rhetoric? Each what if lingered like a storm cloud, but he pushed against the tide, reminding himself of the solidarity he had built with Carla and his unsuspected supporters. "I am enough," he whispered to himself, echoing words he had heard from somewhere vague yet poignant. He would not give in to self-doubt, not now, not ever. He was not just fighting for a piece of land, he was fighting for his place in the world. As he prepared for bed that night, the world around him was imbued with a sense of urgency. Jack could not sleep. Images of boardrooms filled with cold stares, whispers of disdain, and challenging questions plagued his mind. But he also envisioned their surprise at a tenacious rancher who refused to bow beneath corporate might. Tomorrow would be a test of more than just facts, it would demand authenticity, courage, and perhaps the realization that he held power in this narrative. With a determined heart, Jack closed his eyes, allowing the anticipation of the dawn to envelop him, knowing that the tide was about to change. A new chapter awaited him, one that would either solidify his identity or tear apart the very fabric of his existence. The sun would rise, and with it, the moment that could change everything. Would he rise to meet it, or would he be swept aside? As he lay there, a final reminder lingered: this journey was not merely about his struggle but a collective call to recognize the strength that lies within an individual willing to stand firm against the storm. As dawn broke over the horizon, splashing hues of gold and orange across the land, Jack felt a sense of urgency flood his veins. Today was more than just an appointment, it was a reckoning, a confrontation between his past and what lay ahead. Steeling himself, he emerged from the shadows of the ranch house, allowing the early sunlight to wash over him, feeling its warmth imbue him with vigor that he headed for the truck, pushing away thoughts of the meeting's potential outcomes. Instead, he focused on the certainty of his purpose. The generations of his family had cultivated and cherished this land, and he would not allow some corporate entity to erase their legacy. With every step, he mentally rehearsed key points, strategy crystallizing in his mind like frost on a winter morning. Arriving at the corporate headquarters, Jack felt the weight of the building press down on him, a stark contrast to the open skies of his ranch. The sterile environment stifled, a far cry from the richness of his fields. He swiped his badge and entered the conference room, nerves simmering beneath a facade of resolution. He surveyed the long table lined with executives, their expressions unreadable. This was their domain, and he was the intruder. The meeting commenced with the expected pleasantries, but Jack found his mind racing. They spoke in circles, using terms that felt foreign and disconnected from his reality. Words like profit margin and long-term investment floated around the room, suffocating the values he held dear. Here, amid their polished professionalism, the real stakes were obscured, and he began to feel the sense of overwhelm creeping back in. But as he looked around, Jack noticed something unexpected: their anxiety. Their calm exteriors appeared to belay flickers of trepidation in their eyes as they took in his presence. If he was going to succeed, he realized he must exploit their unease, not with hostility, but with a fierce commitment to the truth. Taking a breath, he leaned into his role as the guardian of the ranch, drawing on every ounce of resolve. He stood. His voice, initially shaky, grew stronger as he presented his case. He spoke not only about soil and sustainability but also of memories, the laughter of children and the whispered secrets of the wind through the corn. It was not merely a financial transaction he was presenting, it was a narrative, a story of heritage that should resonate with them on a personal level. As he articulated each point, he caught sight of their reactions, frowns furrowing brows as he challenged their motives. He could sense the room shift, the air thickening with tension. They were no longer just executives chewing on numbers, they were now listeners, grappling with the emotional heft of his convictions. Jack watched their expressions flicker from skepticism to contemplation, the facade of indifference beginning to crack. Then, one of the executives, a sharp-looking woman who had been scrutinizing him intently, interjected. "But Jack, what if we respect your heritage but still find that developing this land is ultimately better for the community as a whole?" This question, while seemingly benign, cut deep. Would it lead him down the road of justification, or would it challenge his foundational beliefs? Internally, he wrestled with how to respond, grappling with the moral ambiguity simmering at the heart of her inquiry. He realized he was at a crossroads, both personally and professionally, faced with the dilemma of upholding his values against a backdrop of compelling arguments. I have nothing against progress, but progress should not come at the expense of our history, our soul, Jack asserted. If that's the cost, then I refuse to sell. Uncertainty hung in the air, thick like the tension of a thunderstorm waiting to erupt. The eyes around the table softened, the narrative pivoting. In this moment, Jack was no longer just fighting for his land, he was in a battle to redefine what success meant in a world driven by numbers, but as the conversation intensified, an unsettling thought brushed against his consciousness. Would they recognize the value he fought for, or would he be cast aside as just another obstacle in their path? With that lingering uncertainty, Jack realized the challenge ahead was about to get even more complicated. Would he find common ground amidst their deliberations or continue his fight against a tide he couldn't fully comprehend? This was only the beginning of a confrontation that would demand everything he had, revealing the very essence of who he was meant to be in this changing landscape. Jack's heart raced as he navigated the labyrinthine halls of the corporate setting, feeling as though he were swimming against an unrelenting current. Each step brought a familiar urgency, but this time it was charged with determination. Overhead, fluorescent lights buzzed with artificial energy, contrasting sharply with the natural warmth he'd awoken to just hours before. As he made his way back to the conference room for the follow-up meeting, he mentally rehearsed his next move, hoping to capitalize on the shift in atmosphere he had sensed. The stakes felt even higher now. What had begun as a simple defense of his land had evolved into a broader dialogue that challenged the very foundations of his identity. Jack wasn't merely a guardian of a generational legacy, he was a messenger, bridging the gap between ancestral values and modern corporate interests. As he entered the room, he noticed the executives fidgeting, their anticipatory energy now palpable, certainty fraught with anxiety. Jack, the sharp-looking executive acknowledged, her voice steady yet edged with curiosity. You mentioned heritage. Can you define what it means for you? For us to understand fully. Her question felt like an invitation, a double-edged sword that could either deepen his connection or lay him bare. Jack paused, weighty silence settling in. He realized it was an opportunity to not only advocate for his land but to draw on vulnerabilities that made him human. What it means is more than just property lines or crops. This land has stories, countless moments of joy and pain, of growth and decay. My ancestors built lives here. They planted seeds not just in soil, but in dreams, dreams I must honor. The words flowed out, each resonating with a fierce truth he fought to articulate. Jack's open vulnerability seemed to catch the room off guard. The executives exchanged glances, their polished facades momentarily faltering, revealing uncertainty beneath the practiced professionalism. They were grappling with a narrative far removed from their balance sheets. A ripple of recognition swept through the group as Jack continued, weaving tales of family gatherings, of weathering storms both literal and metaphorical. This was no longer just about land, it was about a shared humanity that connected them all. Still, doubts twisted within him. Was he losing his footing? Would they misconstrue his emotional appeal as weakness? He had to tread carefully, weaving a balance between emotion and steadfast resolve. I don't wish to reject progress, but I will not do so at the cost of my family's legacy. We can find a middle ground, one that merges the past with a sustainable future. Their eyes shifted again, this time with a flicker of intrigue. Jack noticed the once rigid postures posting small shifts, folded hands had become unclenched. Perhaps, he thought, he had kindled a spark of interest. Yet, trepidation still gnawed at his insides. How much ground could he actually gain? Would they see through his passionately delivered words, merely tossing them aside as emotional leverage? Then, another executive chimed in, an older man with steel-gray hair and an intensity that proposed a contrast to the previous woman's circling inquiry. But Jack, the community isn't blind to the needs of economic growth. Your appeal to history is compelling, but what if we proposed a partnership that honored both? The challenge hung palpably in the air, charged with implications that felt like the weight of a boulder. Could partnership constitute a compromise, or was it merely a different shade of encroachment? Jack sensed the enormity of this moment pressing down on him. How would he navigate this delicate negotiation without losing what he stood for? His mind raced again, now curiously dancing between the dualities of possibility and peril. Jack knew the forthcoming decisions would demand not only his emotional tenacity but a re-evaluation of his understanding of not just survival, but of progress defined on his own terms. With that dawning realization crystallizing in his mind, Jack recognized the ensuing conversation would be pivotal. It would lay the groundwork for either a cooperative vision forward or deepen the conflict into an unrelenting battle. Steeling himself, he prepared to respond. The real question now loomed large: would he find the strength to redefine partnership without losing the heart of what he cherished? The next exchange would be crucial, and he couldn't afford to falter. As the executives leaned in, Jack sensed the storm was far from over. The moment of truth loomed, ready to unravel. Jack took a deep breath, centering himself as the executives waited for his response. He felt the weight of their both eager and skeptical gazes, the room thick with implications that wrapped around him like a vice. He had opened a door, now he needed to step through, carefully. Partnership, he began, a deliberate edge to his tone, is a promise, not just a transaction. It has to be built on trust that our history is valued as much as potential profits. If we work together, it must mean genuine stewardship of the land, not just its exploitation. I want to know how you envision this potential partnership. Jack's voice held steadiness, but inside, his heart raced. Would they recognize his sincerity? Or would they see him as a mere obstacle? The silence stretched, making his skin prickle, until the older executive nodded, a glimmer of respect lining his features. I appreciate your perspective, Jack, the man said slowly, weighing his words. Many companies see partnerships as simply leveraging resources. But you present a different narrative, one that could resonate with the community and with our shareholders. Jack sensed a shift, an opportunity to steer their interest into something meaningful. He pressed on. Then we must define what this partnership looks like from the ground up. It can't be about displacing families or altering landscapes recklessly. Let us explore sustainable practices that not only preserve my land but can show the company's commitment to responsible development. His conviction filled the air, and he caught sight of nodding heads. The mood had changed. Curiosity ignited genuine dialogue. Jack's mind swirled with ideas, trying to construct a framework that could align his legacy with their corporate aspirations. What are your thoughts on regenerative agriculture? Jack proposed, buoyed by a sudden burst of courage. We could implement practices that would rejuvenate the land rather than deplete it. You have the resources, and I have the knowledge of the land. A murmur of approval passed through the group, and Jack could feel a crack forming in the corporate armor surrounding them. Yet, a nagging doubt laced his confidence. Was he sacrificing too much of his vision by bending to their interests? Was cooperation synonymous with capitulation? The woman who had initiated this dialogue leaned forward, her expression contemplative. What you're suggesting sounds promising, but we need tangible metrics, Jack. Something that outlines our responsibilities and your expectations. Jack contemplated her words, realizing they were a crucial test of his own resolve. It required translating his emotional ties to the land into concrete terms that bridged the gap between ambition and heritage. We can establish a foundation for transparency and assessment, he responded, striving for clarity. We share stewardship. I can bring the community's needs to the table, and you can assure your investors that those needs are being respected. It's not just a partnership, it's a promise to both. Striking that balance felt essential, the land belonging not only to him but also to those who had farmed, toiled, and lived on it for generations. He was not alone in this. Their fates intertwined in ways he had never fully grasped until now. Yet, as the conversation unfolded, his heart wrestled with the urgency to protect his family's story while courting their collaborative interests. The fork in the road loomed ahead, one path leading into an anticipated compromise, while the other threatened to strangle the very identity he clung so fiercely to. Jack, we'd like to see a formal proposal, the older man concluded, his voice marking a pivot in the discussion toward momentum. Let us consider the potential of this partnership. A wave of hope surged within Jack, yet it was laced with trepidation. The room buzzed with a newfound energy, but he understood it was merely the beginning. As he began to draft his proposal, he could feel the stakes elevating, the impending realization that this partnership would demand his unwavering commitment in ways he had not yet foreseen. However, his next move felt crucial. What if they pushed for terms that compromised his principles? The stakes had shifted. This was no longer just about securing land, it was about securing identity itself. And beneath that, a deeper question pulsated. Once again, why was he willing to compromise? Would he ultimately wield the strength to stand firm against an overreaching corporate tide, or would he falter, sacrificing too much of himself in the name of progress? As the executives conducted their discussions, Jack's determination coiled tighter. The moment of clarity danced just out of reach. He needed to find the answer. Days turned into nights as Jack immersed himself in the unrelenting task of crafting the proposal. The weight of the keyboard pressed against his fingers, every keystroke a mix of desperation and determination. He needed to outline a vision that merged his principles with the corporate aspirations laid before him. But with each revision, the specter of doubt loomed larger in his mind. Would his efforts be reduced to mere statistical data on profitability? He took breaks to step outside, where the sun painted the landscape in shades of gold and green. Each excursion drew him back to his roots, to the very soil that had nurtured his family for generations. He recalled the laughter of children playing in the fields, the visions of future generations thriving on this land, filling him with fierce resolve. This wasn't just business for him, it was a living history, a narrative interwoven with the earth itself. Returning to his desk, he grappled with how best to articulate the invaluable connection between land stewardship and corporate responsibility. Jack's resolve solidified as he drew a line between passion and profit. The prospect of proposing a metrics-driven partnership urged his hand, yet it also stirred butterflies in his stomach. In those moments of quiet contemplation, he questioned whether humanity could exist within the cold calculations of corporate entities. He started crafting a section dedicated to community impact, a vital element he believed was necessary to root his proposal firmly in morality. The very idea of sharing stewardship felt empowering, a victory for all voices long silenced. But with each clause he penned, he often found himself engaged in inner dialogue, questioning the sacrifices he was prepared to make. Would it be enough? Would this partnership mean the dilution of his legacy, or could it be an emerging chapter in an ongoing story? A palpable tension filled the air when he returned to the conference room to present his initial draft. Executives sat expectantly, their tablets in hand, ready to dissect his words. Jack's eyes flitted over their faces, searching for signs of encouragement among the seasoned expressions. He swallowed hard, steadying himself against the tide of anxiety that threatened to wash over him. This proposal outlines not only the economic benefits of our partnership but emphasizes the responsibility we must bear as stewards of this land, he started, injecting urgency into his voice. The words flowed more freely now, an almost instinctual rallying cry. I believe that true innovation is deeply rooted in preserving our heritage while looking toward the future. As he spoke, he saw the executives lean in closer, intrigued by his fervor. Yet, lurking behind their interest was a potential threat. Could they twist his intentions, molding his words into something unrecognizable? Still, he pressed on, discussing metrics for success intertwined with ethics. Sustainability wasn't a concept bound to standards alone, it needed to resonate on a human level, touching lives directly. His heart raced as he ventured into a territory of his making, community engagement. Imagine a scenario, he proposed, where the success metrics extend beyond shareholders to challenging poverty, improving livelihoods, creating an environment where agriculture thrives, and the community emerges stronger. The executives exchanged glances, some nodding, others tapping pens against tables as they mentally processed what he had laid before them. There was intrigue, yes, but also a whisper of skepticism. Jack felt the stirrings of a challenge arise. Would they accept the moral roadmap he was proposing, or simply return to their comfort zones, preferring the predictable calculations of profit over purpose? as he concluded, the room was electrified both with possibility and the weight of unvoiced questions. The older executive leaned back, folding his arms, his brow furrowed in thoughtful consideration. Jack's heart pounded in that electric silence. He wrestled with uncertainty, wondering if he had taken it too far or just far enough to ignite something substantial. The moment of truth arrived as the executive finally spoke. "You've presented a compelling vision, Jack. However, there are many eyes watching us, and the stakes are higher than you can imagine." Was he ready for that scrutiny? Could he handle the backlash of challenging the status quo? Jack felt the tension snap through him. It was the moment of clarity he sought. Unbeknownst to him, that clarity might just lead him into a confrontation that would test his core values. In that decisive moment, he realized, it was not just about crafting a proposal, it was about facing the looming challenge of negotiation, an intricate dance of power that could redefine everything he stood for. With newfound awareness, Jack understood that the time had come to face the formidable corporate tide that awaited him, understanding that progress hinged upon the choices he would make now. Would he forge ahead with the conviction to influence change, or would he retreat into the shadows of fear? The silence in the conference room hung like a heavy cloud, filled with unspoken tension. Jack's mind raced, processing the implications of what had just transpired. He had laid bare his aspirations, but would they truly embrace the vision he had crafted, or were they more inclined to stick with their traditional metrics that prioritized profit above all else? He couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing at a precipice. Rejecting the familiarity of financial spreadsheets for a path rooted in ethical responsibility was no small feat. What had started as a proposal was morphing into a personal mission. Jack understood the stakes not just for the corporate entity stifled by conventions, but for himself as he faced the elders of a system fortified by years of historical precedent. Weeks of preparation had led to this moment. Yet, with every word he spoke, he felt as though he was inadvertently unearthing buried fears from within. How many times had he stuttered when faced with authority in the past? How many times had he reined in his ideas, choosing acceptance over the risk of dissent? Now he was thrusting his ideals to the forefront, daring to challenge an entire paradigm. The older executive finally broke the tense silence, voicing admiration still tinged with caution. "You've ignited a discussion, Jack," he said. "But the path ahead is fraught with scrutiny. Can you rally those skeptical about this vision?" The question landed heavily. To face external dissent meant cultivating his self-assertion and becoming a leader capable of guiding others from doubt into possibility. Jack had always been skilled at understanding the land, reading the weather, and predicting harvest patterns. But this was a different kind of weather, a storm of human emotions and corporate values colliding. As the meeting progressed, Jack contemplated his options. There was an opportunity here, not just to reshape the future of the proposal but to redefine his own identity within it. Would he instigate change, or merely become a footnote in someone else's narrative? The notion struck him he didn't just want to be a conduit for ideas, he wished to be a catalyst for action. Seeing the executive's intrigue, Jack leaned into that potential. "Change isn't supposed to be easy," he responded, an ember of conviction igniting in his chest. "The discomfort reminds us that we're stepping into uncharted territory. What are we if not innovators? The land we cherish was shaped by those who had the courage to risk their comfort." His words hung in the air, buoyed by the sincerity behind them. For the first time, he saw a glimmer of understanding on some of the executives' faces. He recalled moments spent learning from mentors back home, those who had faced their own battles against naysayers to forge their paths. Perhaps this was his moment to step into that lineage, a legacy that emphasized courage intertwined with authenticity. But as the dialogue deepened, Jack felt the veil of eagerness overshadowed by the cold specter of doubt. More questions flooded his mind. What if they rejected him? How could he bring others along on this journey if he didn't have support? With renewed ardor, he conjured strategies to navigate the impending negotiations. He needed allies among the executives, those willing to champion his cause. Jack understood he had to identify champions within this circle to combat skepticism. His thoughts crystallized into action. He would seek connections, share stories, and engage with the human side of their corporate structure. Let us not only discuss metrics, he proposed. Let us share personal experiences, what drove us here today, and why the land matters beyond just balance sheets. As heads nodded around the table, Jack felt warmth creeping back into his veins, the fire within him reigniting. Still, doubt lingered at the edges, whispering reminders of the road ahead. He needed to brace himself for the challenge, to counter the disbelievers who would resist his ideas for fear of disruption. He paused, noticing the executive who had initially expressed skepticism observing him intently, brows still furrowed. What do you think our responsibilities are towards the communities involved? Jack casually probed, sensing an opportunity to foster dialogue, but before the executive could respond, a sudden realization struck him: his own motivations were entangled with accountability. The needs of the community were his compass. Standing up was no longer merely about him. It was about shedding light on the often muted voices within the heart of the land, those who had been marginalized for too long. As thoughts of community rang in his ears, Jack felt the weight of his own legacy pressing upon him. This path was fraught with uncertainty. Could he carry that legacy alongside the risk of being cast aside as just another idealistic dreamer? With the breath of resolve filling his lungs, Jack knew he was forging ahead into a void of challenges waiting to test his mettle. The time for prudent choices had arrived. An intricate ballet of persuasion and integrity awaited. There would come a moment of reckoning, and it would reveal who he truly was. As the meeting drew to a close, Jack locked eyes with the older executive one last time, a silent challenge exchanged, a glimmer of understanding behind hardened walls. Would he truly align with Jack's vision, or was the old way rooted too deeply to embrace change? With that question lingering in the air, Jack recognized the battle ahead. It was no longer merely about crafting a proposal or facing doubts. It was about stepping into the arena of negotiation, vulnerability in hand, ready to declare that the stakes were higher than profit alone. Each encounter ahead would demand a balance of courage and conviction, revealing not just what he stood for but what shadows still gripped his spirit. And as he walked out of the office, Jack could only wonder, what awaited him on this perilous path of negotiation, and how would he ultimately cement his legacy? The dust of the Texas plains had settled as Jack faced a reality he had only begun to envision: a partnership that melded heritage with opportunity. With the proposal drafted and feedback received, he found himself at the dawn of his greatest challenge yet. Confidence surged within him as he carved a path toward a new identity, transforming from a mere rancher into an advocate for both land and community. In the weeks following the initial discussions, Jack dedicated himself to a relentless pursuit of clarity. Each morning, he awoke early to survey his ranch, reminding himself of the legacy he was fighting to protect. The rich landscapes and the legacy they held fueled his sense of purpose. No longer resigned to the fate that threatened his land, he embraced the mission, transforming fear into resolve. In the warmth of the sun, strength radiated from within, echoing his ancestors' whispers of resilience. Jack met often with the executives, drafting proposals that incorporated sustainability metrics alongside economic projections. As he framed the partnership's architecture, his resolve solidified. The conversations had shifted. They recognized his commitment to stewardship as more than just a business strategy. It was a rallying cry for ethical action that extended beyond profit margins. "Jack, I believe you're onto something valuable," the sharp-looking executive observed one afternoon, a hint of respect mingled with her professional demeanor. "Your passion can impact our public relations strategy. Our shareholders want to see innovation." It was validation Jack had yearned for. He was no longer merely an adversary, he had become a respected partner and voice among a realm dominated by figures and statistics. The turning point arrived during a community forum he organized, inviting the executives to listen directly to those affected by the potential developments. He stood before a crowd of neighbors whose lives intertwined with the land in intimate ways. Sharing stories of family history steeped in soil, he invited the executives to witness firsthand the emotional weight of their decisions. "This isn't about spreadsheets, it's about the fabric of our lives," Jack stated, his voice steady and resolute as he introduced members of his community who had fought valiantly for their rights. Unfolding testimonies flowed like a river, each tale echoing the concerns and hopes of their community. The executives, once distant, were now visible, shifted in their seats, absorbing a message that transcended business models. It was then that Jack recognized the power of authenticity. Genuine connection rendered past fears impotent, days turned into weeks, and as negotiations sharpened, manifesting shared commitments into concrete plans, Jack felt an unprecedented sense of accomplishment. Proposals evolved into actionable promises, initiatives aimed at sustaining the land while benefiting both community and corporation alike. He was fostering a cooperative environment that challenged corporate norms, advocating practices that reflected a forward-thinking ideology. The moment arrived when they presented the finalized agreement, one that elegantly straddled the values Jack held dear and the corporate aspirations for growth. As he read through the terms, the finality washed over him. A pang of nostalgia mingled with pride surged through his veins. He had indeed achieved something significant. Recognition flowed thereafter. Jack found himself awarded a Community Impact Award at the annual town gathering, a testament both to his determination and to the success of his efforts. As he stood before a crowd of friends and neighbors, each face reflecting admiration, he realized how far he had come from isolation and fear to a respected leader in the community he loved. Together, he addressed the audience, "We have shown that by working through our differences, we emerge not just as individuals or families, but as partners. Our heritage and the dreams we aspire to are not at odds with progress. They drive it." His words struck chords of unity that reverberated in the hearts of many. Jack stepped off the stage, satisfaction washing over him as waves of applause enveloped the room. His internal transformation felt complete. He had proven not just to them, but to himself, that he was capable of navigating complex crossroads with unwavering resolve. Now, he stood firmly, unshakably connected to both his land and community, sustaining the very essence of who he was while positioning them both for the future. In that moment, amidst the celebration, he felt a profound connection to his family legacy, knowing he had secured not just his place in history but also established a legacy of his own. This was an achievement born from grit, perseverance, and the understanding that true leadership arises not from the shadows of fear, but from the loud and passionate proclamations of what is right. You need to subscribe now to our channel for more exclusive emotional stories that inspire and transform. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and make your voice heard. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Jack's journey. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness an incredible tale of personal growth and triumph.